Welcome to Research Renaissance, presented by the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Embark on a journey into the forefront of cutting-edge brain science as we feature insightful discussions with a diverse array of guests, from early career researchers pioneering groundbreaking science to influential voices in investment communities, policymaking, and research institutions. Together, we delve into neurological diseases, their causes, treatments, and the quest for cures. Join us in advancing our understanding of the brain and addressing its ailments. Welcome to Research Renaissance. I'm Deborah Westphal, your host and guide through the fascinating future of the brain. Joining me today are Russ Glassman, founding trustee of the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust, and Rebecca Bartoli, executive director of the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Each brings a unique perspective and experience to enrich our conversation. Let's dive in. So first, welcome, and thank you so much for being on this podcast. Very excited for this discussion because this is kind of a foundational discussion around the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. So let's start with you, Russ. I think you've known Alvin and Heidi Toffler the longest. I think it was 1979 that you met them. You were their accountant. Over time, you became their financial advisor and a close friend. Can you just start and tell us about how that happened in your relationship with the Tofflers?
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you for hosting this, Deb, and hi, Rebecca. So in 1979, I met the Tofflers. I had merged my accounting practice with a gentleman named Seymour Gross, who was friends with Alvin Toffler. And Seymour asked me to join him on providing accounting services and financial advice and some business guidance to the Tofflers. The Tofflers at that time had already written Future Shock, which is the work they are known for most widely around the world. But they had just completed the third wave and made a movie, a documentary film from it, which is used for education. And there are some of other rights going along with the film. So there was plenty of work to do. And my partner, Seymour Gross, he worked with Al. They worked on broad strokes, big picture. That's what Al liked to focus on. And I worked with Heidi. Heidi was very, very detail-oriented. There was no detail that Heidi wouldn't spend a lot of time on because she needed to be very, very exact. It was wonderful to see them work together like this. They complemented each other so well, and they were truly partners and collaborators. So that was the start of the relationship, which lasted 40 some odd years. You referred to me as a founding member. I am. The Tofflers had one child, Karen Toffler, and Karen predeceased them. So they wanted to do something very important, something very useful with the monies that they accumulated from their writings and their lecturing. So they founded the foundation with me as the third trustee to support medical research, to support education in the medical field. And that was the start. Al passed away in 2016 and Heidi in 2019. And it's a great loss that I know Rebecca and I still feel today.
Thank you. So what about you, Rebecca? How did you come to meet, as you refer to them as Mr. and Mrs. T? How did you meet them?
I came in the picture many years later after us. It was actually 2006. I had originally moved from Boston to Los Angeles on a dance scholarship and was working in the entertainment field and was looking for something a little more consistent as far as work. And I went to this temp agency that I had utilized in between entertainment gigs and shared with them that I was actually looking for something more permanent. And the individual that I dealt with, she had said that she had an author that was looking for a full-time assistant, someone to manage the office and do, administrative work that she thought I would be a perfect fit with. That was on a Wednesday. She said he was already interviewing people, but she was going to call them and tell them they should interview me. So 2 days later, I had an interview first with Linda, who was a longtime assistant to the Tofflers. And she said the same thing. I need to call Al and I need to tell him not to hire anyone until he interviews you. So the end of the day, I interviewed with Mr. Toffler and Steve, who was their editor at the time. Mrs. Toffler, of course, was nowhere to be found. She was hibernating somewhere in the house. And literally, I left, and about 15 minutes later, after I drove off, I was offered the position. And so I was with the Tofflers up until both of them had passed. Obviously, I came in after Karen had passed, 6 years after Karen had passed. So I didn't know Karen like Russ did. But I managed their day to day and oversaw the office. And at that time, they were just finishing Revolutionary Wealth, which was the last book that they wrote. So I got to see the ins and outs of a book tour and dealt with their travel, dealt with UDEB, with Toffler Associates and the different aspects of that. And then around 2012 is when we got the news about Mr. Toffler's health. And so at that point, I pretty much transitioned more to a primary caregiver and assisting Mrs. Toffler with Mr. Toffler. And then at the same time that Mr. Toffler had passed in 2016, Mrs. Toffler had had some surgeries and some health challenges. And so took care of her and was with her, as Russ knows. Russ was there as well the day we were with her up to the day that she passed. And they were just more like family than employers. And I always share with people that I talk to that my favorite time with the Tofflers is when we would kind of, at the end of the day, I'd go over and we'd kind of sit around the kitchen table and, I'd be able to ask questions and we'd talk about the past and their stories or what was going on in current events or what they saw, forthcoming in the world. And that was just something that really, really stuck with me. And I'm sure later on we'll share. It's something I think that even the trust has developed, that very hands-on family sort of feel. And then, those round tables of discussions that we, were able to have and look into the future.
That's wonderful. I think, there's a lot to be said about Alvin and Heidi Toffler and their contributions to so many. But I think, going back to what you said, Russ, is that at the founding of the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust, the Tofflers wanted to do something very important in medical research, education. What do you think the kind of the driving force was, or the vision of that? Were those discussions, did they take place before the passing of Karen Toffler, or were there those after? What was that kind of driving force?
Well, the driving force, I think, is that we wanted to honor the Toffler's legacy. I mean, they were all about work, and they had decided that this is what they wanted to do, and they left it in my hands and the replacement trustees after each one of them passed. But they were busy working, writing, speaking, trying to, help the world. The Tofflers spoke a lot, wrote a lot, especially in the beginning, about the fact that we live in a rapidly changing world where new ideas and the resulting new technologies require us to be able to change and to examine things, and also to realize that knowledge becomes obsolete. They were also very, very interested in the fact that everybody's ideas are worth something. Everybody's ideas count, and no one should be discounted, and they should be supported. So having their accumulated wealth to be used for medical research, we wanted to do something that would kind of mirror what they would want. So the fact that they were futurists, they wrote about the future, about dealing with the future, about trying to get ahead of the curve and anticipate, how we're going to be able to react to things. We decided, and by we, I mean Rebecca, myself, and my co-trustees, Peter Katona and Tom Johnson. We decided that the best thing to do would be to support and invest in early stage, innovative medical research. So we do not do fundraisers. We do not have, dinners or walkathons. What we sought out to do was to find researchers at universities who are doing cutting edge, innovative research where they are not able to get funding, but where if they have any measure of success, their research can be used by others to go to the next level and maybe get funding from the NIH, or maybe our funding will help them be able to apply for further funding from the NIH. So finding these innovative researchers at universities became what we thought a great idea to honor the Tofflers. It was something that they would love to do. They would love to speak to all these researchers, to listen to what they're working on, to what they're thinking on. That would thrill them to no end. Now, we have the privilege of doing that. And, we'll talk later on in this podcast about some of those experiences. But that is, what we've done. Uh, we call them Toffler Scholars. And we have 10 universities now. Though we don't limit ourselves to just those 10, we have given money to researchers at other universities. But this is what we do.
Yeah. So Rebecca, these early career researchers and, doing early stage research, there seems to be an evolution of that vision or mission, if you would, of the trust from a broad medical to now more neurological diseases. Can you kind of talk about that evolution and really, because the trust is new. It's been what, officially maybe 4 or 5 years?
Well, actually, functioning in this fashion, it's only really been since 2019 when Heidi passed. So I guess this is 5 years now.
Yeah. So how is that, Rebecca, working with these early career researchers? What is your experience?
I mean, it's actually been a very amazing experience, and I'm also learning a lot. Obviously, when the trust was created, which was after Karen had passed, as you mentioned, it was very broad. It was basically just to support medical research, education, technology. Mrs. Toffler loved medical science, wanted to be a doctor, wasn't really heard of back in that day.
She would tell the doctors what to do.
Oh no, I've seen it in person.
Right. Well, if a plumber came to the house, she would get under the sink with the plumber and tell the plumber what to do. If the gardener came, she would get out in the garden and tell the gardener what to do. So she told the doctors what to do. She also told me what to do, but I kept her out of tax law trouble.
But I would actually call Mrs. T and be like, I have whatever. And she would totally diagnose me and it was always correct. But we're going off the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We just have so many great stories, Deb. But when the trustees, as Russ said, once we came together after the Tofflers had passed, we realized that we didn't want to just be like every other organization and just forwarding money toward Alzheimer's or forwarding money toward dementia or Parkinson's, and not really knowing once we released that seed what was being produced from it or what was blossoming from it. And so in one of our annual meetings, we were dialoguing, and I believe it was Tom Johnson, who was also very close to the Tofflers, came up with this concept of really identifying early stage investigators that are working on early stage research. And as Russ had mentioned, we came up with the Toffler Scholar Program, which I'm sure we can go into a bit later. And so we all agreed and thought that that was an area that maybe wasn't getting a lot of attention, that the trust could really come in and make a difference in. And what we've learned just in dealing with the many investigators that we have that are doing early stage research, that what we are doing is very much needed in the area of research. A lot of our investigators have actually shared with us that they've not been able to get more of the traditional funding, or where their research is at, they're not able to get the attention of like an NIH. And so by the trust coming in and identifying them and giving this seed money to, start at this early stage, they're actually able to get where they need to be able to get more of the traditional funding, or to be able to apply for NIH funding, which we've also had some success stories in. So I think we just found our niche and we found where we fit. And for us, over the past 4 to 5 years, it's proven to be successful.
So that's kind of the criteria, right? Early career researchers doing early stage research, kind of that leading edge. What is that process for finding these people and or them finding you through the trust? What kind of describe what that process is, and how is the grant making done? Is it an annual process, or how do people engage?
The way it kind of started was we fed it to universities. So we all reached out to the directors of development at various universities, and we interviewed them. We, found out what was going on in their labs, what kind of work they were doing, what they were supporting and encouraging, what were their needs. And that was a pretty exhaustive study. And we went from like 4 universities in the first year to 6 to 8 to 10. We're comfortable with 10. I mean, other universities that are not one of the 10 are free to apply. And we actually have had universities apply and receive money from us. But that was the start of it.
As Russ said, when we were meeting and came up with the idea of the Toffler Scholar Program, it was then, okay, well, how do we execute the program? So as Russ said, we felt it would be best to seek out universities that have these neurology departments that are doing cutting edge research in the area of neurological diseases, which is the trust focus. And like Russ said, we just started knocking on doors and reaching out and sharing what we were doing and who we were and where we came from and what our focus was with the scholars, what we were looking for in our scholars. And we just developed these amazing relationships with these universities that we have on our roster that have continued since 2019. And so every year we determine what is going to be allocated toward the program at these universities like Howard, like Johns Hopkins, like Boston University, Temple, to name a few. And each university has their own internal process as far as receiving applicants and applications of early stage investigators that fit the criteria for the trust, what we're looking for. And then they will forward to us who they've identified or who they think would be good applicants or scholars. And then we work together to identify those scholars. And then those scholars come on board. They become a part of the Toffler family, a part of the Toffler legacy. And then we normally do a year term, but we do have some scholars that we've continued to fund because their research is at a pivotal stage where they need to go just a little bit further to maybe get that more traditional funding. And so the trust has come in, like Alberto and Sudeshna at Harvard, where we've come in and said, we're going to fund you again so you can continue in the research that you're working on this specific project, because some of them have their hands in more than one project at the same time. And then we just start that relationship with our scholars, which has been amazing. Like, our scholars have been very engaging. They've been very supportive. They'll always check in if they have a paper that's published. Hey, Rebecca, just letting you know, we published this. This is thanks to the trust. And so we're really establishing long-term relationships, not just with the scholars, but with the universities as well.
Yeah, you can hear the pride in both of your voices with these scholars in the relationships, and that's how do you build these relationships, these long-term relationships? What are you doing? Because that's hard, right? It in a very transactional environment, it's check writing and grant giving, but you both have talked about the relationships. What do you guys do to really build those relationships and try to sustain them over an amount of time?
Well, one thing we do, which is you and I, Deb, as soon as our scholars are named, we get right on a Zoom interview with them to get to know them a little better. And from hearing from our scholars, as you know, every time they get on, they're like, wow, this is not the type of interview I was expecting, because we want to know them as people. I mean, obviously, we appreciate the research and we want to know the research and we want to know how the funds from the trust are helping the research and where that research is going. But we also want to know who they are and what their story is. How did they get to where they are now? And they just have some amazing stories, which are all listed on our website. If anyone ever wants to go to tofflertrust.org and browse through our 60 plus scholars that we have already on there, because some of them have just really triumphed to get where they are. And so I believe that's the seed planted that starts that long-term relationship and kind of like breaks the ice and, gets that connection going. And, we're very available to our scholars if they need help with business plans for their research or for what they're working on. If they need help just with something as simple as a LinkedIn, if they need a connection, or they, sometimes they'll see someone on your LinkedIn and be like, hey, Deb, do you think you could connect me? And, when opportunities arise, like recently, you were on the Newt Gingrich on his podcast. And we were like, let's get some of our scholars on there with you. And so we're opening doors and opportunities and connecting them to other resources, even outside of the trust. And that helps that long-term relationship because we're keeping the dialogue going after they receive the funding. And even after that 1-year term is completed within the program, we're just consistently keeping that dialogue going between the trust and the scholars directly.
Yeah, and it sounds like helping their career development, because we want them to stay in research and be successful and someday be the head of a lab or the head of NIH or wherever their career goes. I think that that's very interesting. Both of you have talked about some of the scholars and some share a couple stories about what the scholars are doing or the impact. Do you have any stories to share?
Well, I just had a good experience. We'll talk a little bit later on during this podcast about our Exoloop program. But our most recent one, which was held up at Boston University, we have a scholar there who's working on artificial intelligence to be able to do a better job of predicting someone who would be a candidate to suffer from Alzheimer's. And he asked if anyone was willing to see, how it worked. And I put up my hand. So I answered some basic questions, and his software that he developed in his lab was able to tell me to what percentage, based upon my answers, I am likely to have Alzheimer's at a certain point in my life. So I thought, we were all doing that, and I think it was fascinating. I think after I finished, I think everyone else was sorry they didn't put their hand up before I did. So, that was good. And all the scholars are so engaging and so bright and so, hungry to share. So, I just, think the world of them.
And I love that they want to collaborate with one another. Obviously, we started the X Loop during COVID, but so many of our scholars were wanting to network with one another, which I honestly was green and did not know. I thought researchers were very like, nope, not going to say what I'm doing and you can't know this. But they were like, no, we want to collaborate. We want to know each other. And just to see how some of them have developed. Like one scholar that always comes to mind is our scholar Julia at Boston University. When we first did our initial interview with her, Deb and I, she was sharing exactly what we shared earlier on the podcast about how she just could not get funding for this particular research project that she had. And no one would give it the time to even look at it. She didn't have enough proof to, even go after NIH funding. And so here came the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. And with Boston University, we identified her. We thought her research was very interesting. We forwarded her only about 40,000 at the time for her to do what she needed to do. Literally within a year, she came back to us sharing that because of what the trust had funded with her research, she was then able to apply for an NIH grant and received a $4 million NIH grant from that $40,000 seed that the trust had sown into her early stage research. That to me is just an amazing success story for the trust, because not a lot of people can probably say that, but it falls in line with exactly our criteria and who we are and what we're looking to accomplish with our scholars. And then, there's just so many others, like Aditya at the University of Florida is amazing. And Sylvia at Temple, who is now bringing us new scholars into the Toffler Scholar Program because she's now overseeing her lab and she's able to give other individuals, female scientists, a chance at being able to get their research going. And then just even the collaboration with Ted and Andrew, which we can talk about once we get into our Excellent program.
Well, I was going to say, I think we're helping to evolutionize or revolutionize the research community, because in the very first year where we had like Florida, Harvard, and UCLA were our only universities, there were two potential scholars, or maybe they were scholars at UCLA. One at the UCLA School of Public Health, and the other one at UCLA's School of Medicine, and each one doing research on projects that, kind of crisscross a little bit or over, and they didn't even know of each other. And they're at the same university. And now, as maybe Rebecca will talk about a little later, we have a researcher at UCLA and a researcher at Boston University working together. I think that's kind of like unheard of from the past.
Well, let's talk about it now. Expand on the Exaloop program. What is it? Where, what is the vision of it? And what is this this project that is being shared across universities?
Well, I'll let Rebecca do most of the talking since she worked so hard on it with you. But I want, I want to say, there's like X Prize out there and a lot of other, uh, you know, foundations and charities bring people together and share things. But I think what we do is unique and takes it a step further, as evidenced by the fact that we now have two scholars from opposite sides of the country working together on a project. I'll fill in if there's anything.
Yeah,
I'll talk about the dinner.
Well, I think Exaloop really came about because of what I had shared earlier with the Tofflers about this round table that, we would have at the end of the day where we're sharing ideas or mainly hearing their ideas and Mr. and Mrs. T going back and forth with each other about, you know, where the world was and where it was headed. And they would host dinners at their home with just all different types of individuals and just have these discussions. And I remember every time Mr. Toffler would go speak somewhere, especially in other countries, he would always make sure that I worked with the coordinator to schedule some sort of dinner like the night before where he could just talk to all different types of people to learn about what was happening in that country and what was needed and share ideas. And I think that's really where we all of us came up with the idea for Exaloop, to really be able to bring our scholars together so that they could meet one another, so that they could begin to network with each other, so that they could share their research, share their ideas, in a comfortable environment with all of us. And so that it could help accelerate their scientific innovation and to fuel progress that would benefit the whole of humanity. And so last year we did our very first in person, as Russ said, at Boston University. And for our first, it went extremely well. And just to see, first, it was amazing for me because I got to see all these people in real time, in real life, because everything had been on Zoom because of COVID. So to be able to see them and actually meet them in person, that by itself was just great because we've had so many conversations with them. But then just to see how they all gelled together and how they gravitated toward one another and sharing about their research and to see how much of their research actually overlapped with one another and that, some of the scholars had the missing pieces needed for other scholars that were working in the same field or even in a different field with a different disease. And then when we had our breakout sessions, which Russ and Tom led, we had maybe 5 or 6 proposed ideas for new research in the area of Alzheimer's, dementia, and just to see their minds and how their minds work and how they could just on the spot come up with those. That was even just mind blowing for me because obviously my brain does not think like that. And then through all of those, Andrew, who was a scholar at UCLA, and Ted, who was a scholar at Harvard, they came together with a proposal and basically turned that proposal around that same weekend. We met on a Thursday, and I think, Deb, you had that proposal in your hand by like Saturday or Friday. And so just to see that and then to see what we've been doing as a trust in an attempt to assist them with making this proposal a reality and actually having this proposal funded and have this new research come out of Exaloop. I mean, Exaloop did exactly what we were hoping it would do when we came up with it. And then, of course, a year or two ago, and Russ could probably share about this, we added another component to Exaloop, which were these roundtable dinners.
Right. The dinners are where we bring together people from academia, policy setters, people from industry. We did one in Washington and one in Boston. The one in Washington, we even had someone from the White House there. So Deborah facilitates the dinners. A lot of questions for discussions. It's very lively debate. I don't say anything basically, and neither do the co-trustees, but they will exchange ideas and their thoughts on the future of research, the problems that are being faced by researchers. People in research may get an offer to go into industry, so it's hard to retain good people. And then how do you attract them? There's the politics that goes on in universities, requirement or the pressure to produce a paper, and but basically, again, exploring what the future looks like for research. I mean, Alvin and Heidi Toffler's work is still relevant today in so many areas, and exploring this with these people from various walks of life that interact with each other in this area is very interesting and very helpful to all of them. So we are thrilled to host this dinner. I mean, I think it's a wonderful use of the trust funds, and I think we come away with a lot of valuable information.
So what I hear is you're not only investing in the innovation and the research for that innovation, but you're really investing in the people and the people around doing the research, the people that can support those researchers in building a network, which is so needed. Collaboration is needed to achieve some of these breakthroughs that all of us are really hoping for when we consider these horrible diseases that affect the brain. When you look into the future and that future mission, there's a lot to be done in research in addressing these diseases. I know that you've come up with some future kind of focused areas where you're going to focus that, just kind of hone that in. Can you talk about these focus areas and really, just really briefly, what are they, so that people kind of understand what those buckets of research are that you'll be funding?
Right. So at first we were like very broad because we were learning ourselves. So, we know there are many kinds of dementia. We have a scholar who has made great advances in Lewy body dementia. We have scholars who are studying Parkinson's, and scholars who are trying to relate different types of, dementias. So we decided that in terms of trying to make our support more useful, we've kind of narrowed it down to 5 areas. So, I mean, the first one is biomarker research for early detection of neurological diseases. And this involves the identification and analysis of specific biological markers or indicators that are associated with the presence, progression, or risk of neurological disorders. So we chose this because this field of research holds promise for advancing our understanding of neurological conditions and enhancing diagnostic capabilities for more effective treatment strategies. Another area is translational research for new science. This emphasizes the collaborative efforts of multidisciplinary teams. The field is dedicated to fostering cooperation between researchers from diverse disciplines to bridge the gap between fundamental scientific discoveries and practical applications. By integrating expertise from various fields, this approach accelerates the translation of knowledge into innovative therapies and technologies.
And so that one, Russ, that's really kind of what Exaloop is doing, correct? Is trying to bring these different. Okay, that's interesting. And you said there's a third.
There's actually 5 areas that we've identified. So there's also the area of emerging technology tools for the precision understanding. And this refers to advanced technologies and methodologies designed to enhance our precise comprehension of these disorders. These tools encompass a range of innovative approaches, including advanced imaging techniques, genomics, proteomics, and other high throughput technologies. The primary objective is to leverage these tools to gain a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the molecular, genetic, and cellular mechanisms underlying neurological diseases.
And this is much like when you said that you went and got tested by one of the scholars' software. This is an example of that, correct?
It is.
Okay.
It is. This is one of my favorite areas, actually.
Yeah. The technology tools?
Yes, because I love the advanced tools, the technology. I mean, I remember taking an MRI 40 years ago, and it's like nothing like it's like today. So, I mean, this is, of course, these scholars are all brilliant. So it's requires a lot of work just to understand a little bit of their explanations and their descriptions of what they do. So there's also disease mechanism research for prevention and proactive health. And this involves a comprehensive investigation into the underlying processes and factors contributing to the onset and progression of neurological disorders. The focus here is on understanding the intricate biological, genetic, and environmental mechanisms that influence neurological health. This field plays a crucial role in advancing our knowledge to develop effective preventive measures and promote proactive approaches for maintaining optimal neurological research.
And that's really kind of in the diagnostics, right? That's because right now there's a lot of funding, a lot of information that we're trying to gather around the diagnostic of the disease. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. And the fifth area is one that Peter probably is most interested in because our trustee, Peter Katona, used to be the head of epidemiology at UCLA Medical Center. So here we support population and epidemiology research for understanding future shocks, which is a nice way we slipped in that name, future shocks in brain health, and it involves studying the distribution and determinants of neurological disorders within specific populations. This field aims to analyze the prevalence, incidence, and risk factors associated with brain health issues on a large scale. By examining patterns and trends across diverse populations, researchers can identify potential future shocks, anticipate health challenges, and inform public health strategies to address and mitigate the impact of neurological diseases on a broader scale. This approach facilitates a proactive understanding of the evolving landscape of brain health to implement timely interventions and policies. I can't think of any area that honors the Tofflers more than this.
So it sounds like through these five areas, there's, you're covering, quite an understanding of everything from, what's happening inside the body to the diagnostics, to new tools to understand, to the collaboration of the science and the research, to even understanding kind of big macro trends that are happening here in the United States or globally with these diseases. And, it sounds very exciting with Exoloop and just the cross facilitation of the information and sharing. It just sounds very kind of exciting for the future of the trust in what you're doing and just the impact that you're making with this with these grants and support. So how do you so many try to measure the impact. It's hard. It's very hard to do that. But how, at least currently, how are you measuring that impact in the advancement of knowledge and just really trying to understand what this will do to improve patient outcomes? What is your thinking on that? How are you doing that?
Well, right now, I think our hope is to see these scholars' work and the papers they produce from their work be used by others to take it to the next step. And since we are only been funding scholars for the last 4 or 5 years now, it's still in a very, very early stage. So it takes time to see that. People who invest in research have to understand that the more you work, the more you question, the more you learn, the more you realize what you don't know. So I think it will take time to find, to see something that'll be all over the news. Anytime right now you see something on the news about an Alzheimer's drug, you learn it doesn't work. And you constantly, there's so much research being done now about toxins that go across the blood-brain barrier and medicines that go across the blood-brain barrier and what can cross the barrier and what can't cross the barrier. And it seems like every day that I read something about it, it's something new. So I think for now, the expectation that we have is to see baby steps, to see someone's research go on where they will get other funding, will get NIH funding. And hopefully years down the road, we're going to find answers. Maybe even a way to either identify someone who might get Alzheimer's early in their life so that intervention can be done, or maybe a drug development that would help cure or alleviate the horrors that go along with this disease.
What about you, Rebecca? What are your thoughts on that? As far as the impact, I mean, what do you see? How do you track the impact of the grant? As an executive director, what are you doing to, you talked about the relationships and in keeping, staying aware of publications and staying close to the researchers and the scholars. But talk a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve and in the impact.
Like Russ said, obviously, long term, we're wanting to see something that can cure these neurological diseases, slow them down, or be able to identify beforehand so that there can be preventative things that are done. But part of how we tracked is through the relationship with the scholars, through that direct relationship that we have. And that first year, in addition to that initial getting to know them, we touch back at about 6 months. We touch back at about a year later to check in, to see what's happened, to see, have they had breakthrough? Where are they challenged? Are they stuck? Do they need something else to move forward? And then, as I shared, every time they have papers published, they're, forwarding their papers to let us know we've achieved what we needed to. Now we're going to the next step. And one item that we've recently added is you and I have reached out to all of our scholars that have labs to get their mindset on not just where they fit within these focus areas and where their research is, but we're wanting them to future focus think. And we're wanting them to tell us, okay, we know this is where you're at and this is what you're working on, but like the Tofflers, what do you see that's coming next? Like, what are 2 or 3 projects that maybe will help this or are totally different, but will impact the disease in the same way of the research you're doing, maybe in a better way, maybe the research goes together. And so we've actually been compiling that information so that we can have a broader look at not just where we're at right now, but what's coming ahead. And, Mr. and Mrs. Toffler were always saying, you got to think about what's coming. You can't just get stuck with where you're at. And thinking ahead could even change the direction in which their research is going. One of our scholars at the University of Florida was in the area of Lewy body dementia. We funded him, and nothing was really happening. They were kind of having like some challenges, and we got on one of our 6-month calls to check in and see what was happening. And the trust actually suggested, well, why don't you look at it like this? And then, like, within months, he was reaching back out to us, letting us know that they had a breakthrough, just from that little adjustment. So, again, we know we're not going to see something immediate, and we're okay with that. We're getting in at the foundation of this, and we know that long term, 10 years from now, if they do have breakthrough or they invent something that's being utilized, we know they're going to remember the trust, because we're the ones that were basically the launching pad for them to be able to take this research and keep going.
That's wonderful. So what do you, just ask both of you, what are you most proud of when you think about your work and your association with the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust? Russ, you go first.
Well, I think what I'm most proud of is the fact that we are being innovative. We, of all the dementia-related organizations, are unique. We're not focused on a drug. We are not, incurring a lot of costs, a lot of overhead to, make grants and help, fund other projects. We are very unique. Uh, our money is almost 100% are going towards research. We operate very, very lean. So I'm very proud that we can be different and differentiate ourselves from these other organizations because we all have the same goal and we should all be working together. But it doesn't always work out like that. A lot of these organizations are very proprietary about their own donors. Unfortunately, we don't have any donors, though we would welcome them. Anyone who would want to partner with us in exploring the innovative research that's needed is more than welcome. More than welcome. So I think that's what I'm most proud of, is carving out this niche for ourselves and making ourselves available.
That's great. What about you, Rebecca?
I agree with Russ. I think I'm most proud of our uniqueness, which is something that we hear echoed even in other organizations that you and I have spoken to. Just a lot of other organizations are like, love that we're so hands on with our scholars and that, we keep these relationships going. So I think our support and our consistency, I'd say I'm proud of that too, because we've started something and we're continuing it and we're continuing to see it through and we're continuing these relationships. And then, of course, the research that is being done. How can you not be proud of the research that our scholars are doing and, what they're producing and the papers they're being able to publish and, seeing them grow in their career as a researcher when they get their own lab. And so I would say that as well. And I think the Tofflers would be proud.
I think they would be too. So, Rebecca, if, Russ opened up the door for the listeners, if they wanted to engage with the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust and even support, how can they help and how do they get a hold of the trust?
They can visit our website, www.tofflertrust.org, and they can contact us through there. All of our contact information is on there. They can follow us on LinkedIn, the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust, as well. The three of us are on there as well, but they could follow us on LinkedIn, reach out to us through that avenue. They can also follow the podcast because we're going to have some amazing guests coming up and they'll actually be able to hear, spoiler alert, from some of our scholars that you will be interviewing, Deb. So that's another way just to hear more about the research that the Trust is doing would definitely be through our podcast, but our website as well. And if they're interested in partnering with us, if they're interested in becoming a donor with us and investing in these early stage scientists and investing in their stories and investing in the research that they're doing, then again, they can go to the website and all of our contact information is on there and they can reach out to us.
That's wonderful. And your phone number, Rebecca, is on that website or the trust? Because some people use phones still. They don't use just email. So I want to thank both of you very much for setting the foundation of the trust, explaining what it is, why it came to be, and where the hope is for the future of the trust and the scholars and the research, and really to the breakthroughs of some of these really horrendous diseases that affect all of us in one way or the other. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you to all the listeners for this first podcast.
Thank you for hosting us, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you for joining Research Renaissance. For more information and to stay updated, subscribe for more episodes and visit our website at tofflertrust.org. Feel free to call us if you have any thoughts, suggestions, or just want to find out more about the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Until we meet again, onward and upward.